Good morning, everybody, and happy New Year. It's 2021 today. Where I live in Louisville, Kentucky, it's pretty rainy. We have a creek out back that's flowing as high as I've ever seen it before. So maybe it's a renaissance of sorts and a rebirth. But it's been an exciting and interesting year, 2020. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But let's talk about the most important thing. Just kidding. It's pretty important. Let's talk about coffee. So this morning we go back to Nespresso land and we have the Cafecito de Cuba. Wow, that's light is just too bright. Sorry. The Cafecito de Cuba. So this is probably my favorite Nespresso. It's an intensity 10 on their scale, whatever that means. Um, The I'll just read specifically what they say about it because I think it is pretty interesting. So the origins, it's 100% Cuban Arabica from the eastern part of the Cuban island with fertile soil, ideal climate, et cetera, et cetera. This is the interesting part. To enhance the potential of the beans and highlight their authenticity, Nespresso experts applied a sophisticated split roasting technique. So one half of the beans are roasted for a shorter amount of time to a lighter color to bring out all the unique flavors and spice specific aromas of the coffee. The other half was roasted for a longer period of time to a much darker color to create a strong body with velvety texture and intense, rich flavors. So some of you might remember from my first or second Fridays with Foster that I talked about a difference between a highly caffeinated drink or coffee and a very rich tasting coffee. So the difference being the longer, and I'll reiterate again for those of you who haven't seen it, the longer you roast a coffee, the darker the beans get, but the more you actually roast out the caffeine. So there's less caffeine with a richer, deeper, stronger, bolder taste. On the other side, if you reduce the amount of time that you roast a coffee bean, you will actually get a higher caffeine content, but you'll get a much lighter coffee or a blondish type coffee if you want to go with corporate coffee with Starbucks. But you can have a lighter coffee like that. So what I really like about this is they actually combine both of those. So you get some of the darkness in the bean, but at the same time, you get a strong caffeinated flavor. So um, sorry, the aromatic profile, the dark roasted, intense character of this coffee echoes passionate rhythms of authentic Cuban culture and boasts powerful and delightful smoky notes. And this is why I know I really like it. Smoky notes of wood and tobacco leaves. Anybody who knows me knows that I love, two things I love are acoustic guitars and cigars. So yeah, that's the wood and tobacco leaves are perfect. So here we go. That's really good. It has a little bit of a bite. I don't know how else to explain this, but it has a little bit of a bite on the top of my tongue as opposed to it's not really bitter. Bitterness, when I drink bitter coffees, it kind of hits me on the sides of my tongue. Um, but it doesn't last. I guess that's the velvety smooth part of it. It just kind of flows, which is really nice. I'm gonna have some more. Mm. And that is my favorite, and I think that's probably the reason why is because I get to experience both sides of that coin, the dark flavor and the intensity of the caffeination. So, uh, wow, 2020 is over, and I don't know, does anybody feel any different between yesterday and today? um, I would say that a lot of things are probably almost everything in most people's lives is exactly the same as it was 24 hours ago. But what the interesting thing about this is based on the Gregorian calendar, we have this kind of a mindset switch and we trick ourselves into thinking that things are different. Well, why didn't I change certain things that I wanted to change or think differently about things a week ago? You know, we flip the calendar over and all of a sudden there's an opportunity for a new you or a new me. So if anybody out there is like me or has a lot of the human experience, you've set goals before. And that's a lot of fun for people that like to achieve goals. If it's not, a lot of times the unfortunate part, and thank you, Greg, yes, coffee is king, um, especially having a couple small ones. That's no joke now. I'm ordering this is perfect time for Fridays with Foster and having the coffee element because I'm starting to throw coffee in from anywhere. By the way, anybody who has suggestions on good coffee, preferably, well, whole bean is really the only thing I'll drink outside of Nespresso, and I've had pretty much everything Nespresso has to offer. So if you have suggestions, I'm up for it. Um, but a lot of times the negative side of goal setting is people will use that as um, fuel for the self-doubt or self-criticism machine, which if you're like me, I don't need a lot of fuel in that area. It's pretty much primed and ready to go at any time. So it's really important in my experience to look at the difference between the microwave mentality and the crock pot mentality. I don't know if I'd say raised necessarily with this, but I am wired intuitively as a sprinting microwave thought intense guy. And it just comes natural. I'm asleep or I'm 150 miles an hour. There's naturally speaking, there's very little in between for me. So, and that's been great at times, right? Intensity can be wonderful. It can be very well serving. Uh, Playing football was great for that on game day. But it didn't help that I, lacked a certain intensity on a consistent, basis with practice, right? Because as they say that games are won in practice, not during the actual game, although technically that's where the score's kept. But it's important to look at the difference between those two, and that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. And I want to do a little bit of reflection because everybody's going out there saying, "Oh, forget 2020, let's move on, let's do these things," and I just want to take a little bit of maybe a more introspective look at it. So, um, the one of the quotes that I love, and I don't know who this is attributed to, it may be anonymous, which is why I didn't have it written down, is it is not the first cut of the axe that fells a tree. Because if it were, that'd be great. It would be the intensity would win every single time. But it is not the first cut. It is a methodical process of various cuts and potentially using wedges and different things and tools that can actually point the tree to fall in the right direction, right? And uh, it's not a very quick hit. Okay, so that's why we like to look at the idea of consistency being greater than intensity. Consistency is really what drives home our goals and makes it possible to achieve the things that we'd like to achieve. Now, full disclosure, I already explained to you that I'm an intense guy by nature. The consistency is something that I still struggle with. I've got that microwave mentality, and it's really easy for me to get really excited and really engaged in something for a really short period of time. So it's something that I consistently work on, but that's also one of the reasons that I do these is to show the idea of congruency in my life is that I'm not that anybody's on here because they want to see somebody who's perfect, but I'm not perfect. I definitely don't have this stuff figured out. All of the things I talk to you about is a process that I am going through and continue to go through in my life and business and my personal life and with my family. So I'm sharing this to you maybe also for a certain level of accountability for me, right? Is to let you know that I'm throwing things out there that I do believe in. Some I enact in more regularly, some come easy, and some are more of a struggle. This is one of the things that has been more of a struggle. So goals are greater than actions, right? Consistency is greater than intensity, and goals are greater than actions. So actions also, if you want to further that formula, actions are greater than activities because I can find ways to be really, really active in my life and really active in business, really active when before I joined a more constructive gym. I could go to a gym and engage in a lot of activity, but not do a lot of active working out that would take me towards a goal. A little bit over here, a little over there. And if I didn't have a plan, I was in a lot of trouble. Okay. Not a lot of trouble. It was just a waste of time, right? That I wouldn't be nearing towards the goals that I'm trying to achieve in my life. So, or in the gym in that case. So, the first thing we want to do is just pause for a minute before we look forward. Let's take a look back. So 2020. I think it's really, really important, and I can't emphasize this enough, for us to be very careful and aware of the story that we tell ourselves about 2020, about the effect it had on us, and about our roles, responsibilities, and ownership throughout 2020. Because I think there are a lot of people out there that can get sucked into the I was a victim of 2020 thing, as if 2020 was done to them, and they didn't have any responsibility in response or reaction. So I want to be very careful as we move forward because 2020 was not a total wash. It was definitely weird. It was definitely hard, harder for some people than others in different ways. But there were also some positives to be gained. And I'm not really one to jump up and down and clap about survival. I think there are a lot of things stronger than that we can discuss that maybe are things that we did in order to survive or to hit whatever goal we had that we would claim as survival. But survival is really, to me, it's not an achievement in a lot of cases. That it's I think it's kind of a cop out, and it's actually a negative. I mean, it could be a positive depending on how we talk about it. But most people are like, well, what did you accomplish in 2020? Survival, and it's just like a negative downer as opposed to we survived as a company in a positive way and move forward. Blah blah blah. So I just want to be careful about the story we tell ourselves and the rhetoric we use. Okay, because that we are going to carry that into 2021. There's no real big stopgap in the last 24 hours that have happened since the calendar flipped. The calendar flipped. That's it. I mean, it's almost a bigger deal. Y2K was almost a bigger deal, right? If you remember that, and everybody thought the world was going to end or whatever. So the way we look at the past is actually going to help us plan for the future. So, what is our story going to be? Are we going to complain, or are we going to reflect on the things that we learned and the positive things that occurred in our lives? And if there are negative things, can we figure out a plan to avoid those or figure out what we learned about ourselves through those experiences? And this is a great time for a lot of people to recalibrate the scales. And what I mean by that is the things that we used to look at as areas of gratitude in our lives in a lot of ways have shifted. So so something we did that my wife and I did that was really great last year for the first time. We actually had this it's a whatever you want to call it. We call it a gratitude jar. And what we did was we would write down things we were grateful for just sporadically, right, throughout the years. So just a couple things, and this is about recalibrating. First thing that we did, somehow we threw a picture. You probably can't see it. A little picture of my almost 2-year-old. He'll be 2 tomorrow. This is Liam. He'll be 2 tomorrow. It was his like 1-year birthday, and we just threw a little mini Polaroid that my daughter took in there. And we started looking through these last night, right? We do this every day, and we got into bed last night early. Did not, had no interest in staying up to see the ball drop. We're going to sleep. As soon as we can get to sleep, the kids go down. We might watch a Netflix show or two, but that's it, and we're done. I have no need to stay up until midnight. Those days are long gone. So what we did was we got into bed and we started getting these out and going through them. And I'll tell you what, man, it was wonderful. And excuse me for getting emotional, but here's why. One of the first ones we picked up was on February 18th at 6:15 p.m. Some of these have dates and times. We are pregnant. That's when we found out that we were pregnant with our second son, which was amazing because our first son, it took us 4 years. It was a big deal. Not that this isn't a big deal, but it was really, really trying and really difficult on us, and we weren't sure that it was going to happen. Um, April 9th, we get to spend more time together than ever. I never spent this much time with my parents, and I don't think my parents spent as much time with each other as we have over the last year, which is really a wonderful thing. Um, Here's one that I completely forgot about. I was able to, during one of my workouts, I did 46 handstand push-ups, right? Get up on the wall, put your feet on the wall, do 46 handstand push-ups. I completely forgot about that. If you had asked me a couple years ago if that were a big deal, if I could do that, I'd be like, yeah, that would be a big deal if I could accomplish that. And I did, and of course I forget about it. But when I read it, I said, man, that's a big deal. And a last one, something else that was great on April 13th, 2020, it's a boy. So we found out, you can't see this still. Okay, I'll work on the lighting. I'll get some professionals in here. So we found out it was a boy. He was a boy, and it was a really big deal. So that's awesome, isn't it? Wow, everybody's really excited for me. Guess what sucks about that? I allowed myself to be drawn into the pandemic and get kind of negative and down. And I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't working out physically. My day was a bit rocked, so I wasn't getting up and meditating. I didn't have to take my daughter to school anymore, so my mornings got completely shifted. And we stopped. I stopped, at least at a certain point. I stopped putting things in here. And we tell you what's really sad about that, which what that the real negative part of that is that we could have had, I mean, we were laying in bed laughing last night. We were laughing about some of the things that we put. Some were really silly, about that time she was right or he was right. And, my wife and I have that kind of relationship, so we really enjoy that humor. Um, but man, I'm just thinking, how much more could we have laughed together? If I had only stuck it out, if I had only become more consistent, that said, hey, maybe it's not an everyday thing or a twice a day thing, but every time I have a thought that's X, I need to put something in the jar, right? So this year's going to be different for us because last year was the first year. Now I know how it feels to accomplish some of this. And I also know how it feels to have left uh, some gratitudes on the table. So that's a little life hack for you. You can also, if you wanted to, you can also do that in your business. You can have a gratitude jar or something, and as people have accomplishments and people have experiences throughout the year regarding the business, people they work with, they can put something in the gratitude jar in the business. Um, so when we look back at 2020, so a couple questions. So who in your life surprised you the most in a positive way? It could have been somebody in your family that, hey, I didn't realize that it was going to be this great for us to spend this much time together. It could be somebody at work. So if there was a teammate that really stepped up to the challenge and under the normal working circumstances that we've had for the past however many years and years in your business and people working there, that all of a sudden, when the dynamics of the horizon changed, right, in this playing field that we call business now, certain people maybe had an opportunity to jump in a way that was much more comfortable for them. And they were able to excel and surprise in that way. So I would say make a list of the people that surprised you and let them know it because it's a big deal. They may not be thinking about it, but it's important to let them know. Now, the other side, who disappointed you the most? Who were people in your life, family life, personal life, and business, that you were maybe expecting to be a little bit more on board with you, on board with the business, um, more supportive, maybe more resilient, if you will? Who were those people that you had those expectations of that disappointed you? And the question would be, why? Were your expectations unreasonable? It's often said that expectations are resentments under construction, but there are certain things in life. It's okay to have expectations. So I mean, I can't stop my car every time a car comes towards me because I can't expect them to stay on their side of the road. course, now with cell phones, to be honest with you, most people don't. Most people weave over the WL lines. It drives me crazy because they have their cell phone up in front of their face. But anyway, there are certain expectations that are reasonable to have, but a lot of our expectations are unreasonable. And if we look back at issues we have and why people disappointed us, it usually starts with us. I expected them to do this, do that, say that, or act in a certain way, and they did not. So a lot of us had a significant amount of discomfort this year. And again, we're not, jumping into foxholes and avoiding bullets. So I like to keep a certain level of reality. People did die as a result of this pandemic. Lives were changed. Businesses were harmed, and some will never come back. Some are still struggling and fighting. So I'm not suggesting that this isn't important, but I think a lot of people lost sight because we kind of got into our own little shells, our own ivory towers. We're at home, we're working. I'm only talking to people through my camera, and I get in my own little world about how horrible it is. And I forget that there are a lot of worse things that are happening in the world. There are a lot of worse things that I've been through in my life than the last, 10, 11 months. And a lot of people out there, we're not jumping in foxholes and trying to avoid, mortars, for crying out loud. We're most of us are okay, but because we are shut down in our own towers, our own bubbles, it's become really difficult for that. So at the same time, there's been pain and discomfort as a result of that, and real things. People losing family members to this disease, people losing jobs, and things I mentioned before. There is pain. A friend reminded me yesterday of this wonderful saying. It says that pain is the information that I need for my transformation. You can call it the touchstone of growth, you can call it whatever you want, but there's a lot of times when pain is kind of like a speed bump. It just resets me. It definitely gets my attention and lets me know that, hey, I've got to look in this direction. I've got to look in this direction in areas that I've either neglected or haven't looked at before. And I'll be honest with you, from a business coaching standpoint, the one thing that I've seen across the board during the pandemic is that for the businesses that allowed things to slide for sometimes forever in their businesses, all of a sudden saw the things that they allowed and tolerated in their business explode in the pandemic. For instance, you have people that have teammates that are not operating at the level that they should be. They've looked the other way for years. They're operating about 60 or 70% as opposed to 100 as far as expectations and goals. They let it slide. They let it slide. All of a sudden, the pandemic comes. Nobody's buying anything. Everything starts shutting down. This is at the very beginning of PPP. And they start looking at their team and they say, wow, this guy's only been operating at 70%. And it doesn't look like they're going to be changing anytime soon. Maybe if you've got three people, you're going to end up dropping your C player if you have to drop anybody. But you had them on as part of the team and even enabled them by allowing them to operate in the way that they were for years. You enable them to continue that behavior in the business. And you're not helping them at all because you're letting them believe that they can continue to operate that in the business. So that's one example. Financials is another one. I think there's probably people have never looked at their financials in the same way as they will from now on out as a result of the pandemic from here on out. And the reason being, well, there's some obvious reasons as to why now, but the examples that we have are a lot of people that really only did checkbook financials where they just double check to see how much money they had in the bank at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month. And that's really not budgeting. And it's really not having any kind of financial control over your business. And all of a sudden, this PPP comes in, and I feel bad for a lot of companies out there. Well, I mean, I kind of feel bad. It's avoidable, right? A lot of companies that would go out there and maybe get the PPP, but not take care of it well, or either not use it correctly or not track it correctly, and they may have to pay some or all of it back. That's scary, and it's completely avoidable. But they've always been operating in a certain way. The problem is, like Marshall Goldsmith talks about, what got you here won't get you there. In this case, we never knew that we were headed there. There got thrust upon us all of a sudden, and all of our negativities, uh, all of our fallibilities, everything that we were afraid of in our business or kept pushing away and under the carpet, in the closet, let's deal with it later, came to fruition. A lot of things, anyway. So, what I will say too is I hear a lot, and I've been reading a lot myself. Um, when we go into this year and you're trying to educate yourself about something, I don't care how many books you read. And the reason I say that is so in playing football, I had a bunch of concussions. And back then it was just like, go back in and they hit you on the butt and you go. There weren't really concussion protocols. If you weren't knocked out for a significant amount of time, right, then they just kind of, rub some dirt on it and get back in the game. But anyway, so as a result of that, like I've got some memory issues sometimes. Some of my memory issues are great, especially for 80s movies. Quotes from 80s movies, there's a special place that didn't get affected by those concussions. Don't ask me why. Fairly useless, but very entertaining. But I've read books, and if I don't properly address the information in there, write it down, highlight, go back over, read it twice, I won't pick it up. And the reason I tell you this, I could read as many books as the next guy, maybe more, right? I'm a fairly fast reader. I know words very well. I don't really have to look up too many, so I could do that. But what's that do for me? So I tell somebody I read 100 books this year. Awesome. The question is, what did you apply? What have you applied from that book? So I don't care if you read 2 books this year. If you apply things that shift your life and move the needle, that are ideas you get from that, then that's one of the most important things that you can do. And I want to make sure that people are identifying these things so we're not just going by rote. Everybody's changing 2021. There are gym memberships that are getting ready to fly off the shelves, and then in a month there's going to be a lot of people donating to the gym. And the John Maxwell has a great quote that says he says the decision to do something is nowhere near as important as the management of that decision. So how are we going to manage the decisions that we make today and last night, and not just foxhole, prayers like I'm going to stop drinking forever because I just got, get hammered last night and be hung, but the actual things you said, I really want to change this year. Great. How? What are you going to do? So if there's any way that I can help, any way I can be of assistance for accountability, I love that stuff. And you can reach out to me. And I'm always happy to hear about any ideas, things that you want to discuss on the show. I guess it's a show, sure. And I really am looking forward to a great 2021. Why not, right? But it doesn't have to be too much different tomorrow from today, from yesterday. It's just information and what I choose to do with my attitude today that's going to make the difference to tomorrow. So happy New Year, everybody. Really looking forward to next week, and hopefully I'm going to be getting some interviews coming up here soon, because there's only so much that you can learn about me. I really like hearing from other people and what they're going through. So look forward to what's to come. Have a wonderful day.